So I'm wondering if you guys have any horror stories as speakers that you'd like to share.
I kind of want to say this, and I don't know if I should, but I'm going to anyway.
Welcome to the next installment of Engineer in the Loop for people who develop with models in the loop. This episode is brought to you by Nebraska.Code. Nebraska.Code 2025 is almost here. From July 23rd, 25, the Cornhusker Marriott in downtown Lincoln transforms into the Heartland's biggest dev playground, celebrating its 10-year milestone with 3 jam-packed days of learning and networking. Hands-on workshops to sharpen your skills before the main event, 80-plus breakout sessions that span front-end frameworks, cloud, DevOps, security, AI, agile practices, career growth, and more inspiring keynotes, hallway track camaraderie, and a buzzing sponsor expo, perfect for leveling up your tech stack and your contact list.
We got some special guests. I don't know if everybody saw the LinkedIn kind of hints, but we'll post the key before this episode goes out. We are talking to Ken Versaw and Arthur Doler. Ken is the co-founder of Nebraska.Code and the software engineering manager too at Nelnet. Arthur Doler is the community and culture steward at Avature and international speaker. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
I think this one will be a little bit different since we have 2 guests. We'll go ahead and start with you, Ken. Like, how did you get into engineering? And then maybe want to give us the origin story of Nebraska.Code, like what it is, how it came to be, all that sort of fun stuff.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. Actually started as a software engineer in 2001 at a company called TerraScan. I originally got hired there to do like customer service, so like take calls from like accounting treasurers and stuff like that. I wrote some scripts to automate one of my jobs, and so they said, "Oh, we might have a different job for you instead of taking phone calls on the from customers." So I moved pretty quickly into software engineering, and that's sort of been my path ever since then. So in terms of Nebraska.Code, so I was a software engineer for a while, obviously out of Lincoln, Nebraska. I attended a conference in Orlando, actually, and it was kind of the first time I'd ever really done anything like that, and I saw like the power of having a lot of people kind of come together and just geek out over software engineering and over a career that I absolutely loved, that I was really taken by. But the problem was it was like $2,000 to fly there, stay in a hotel room, and so I just kind of really wished that that we had something similar, that I could attend and wouldn't have to, pay an arm and a leg for. Around that same time, my friend Adam Barney, so he's the other co-founder of Nebraska.Code. He was also a software engineer at that time. We had started a local .NET users group, so we were both .NET developers, and we had been doing it for about 2 years. And back then, back in 2011, 2012, back when we started, Microsoft was really supportive of the community. So we had like I forget what they called them, a Microsoft evangelist who would sort of support our group and come visit us every couple months and do talks on .NET. And then they said, hey, Iowa has this thing called a code camp and all these other places have one. Nebraska needs one too. If you guys are willing to put it on, we'll pay for it. And so that seemed like a really fantastic idea. It kind of came together. It sort of brought together that desire that I had been having for a local conference, and then having Microsoft willing to pay for it was a great deal. Adam and I went to work. We put on our first Nebraska.Code camp. It's very successful. We did a second one. It's very successful. We did a third one. And it just kind of grew from there. For a code camp, for those that don't know, there's sort of like free events on a Saturday, but it kept growing. We didn't want to do just like a Saturday. We wanted to move it on to the week so that it was more available for more people, which is why we kind of dropped the camp name and just called it Nebraska.Code, and just been doing it ever since.
That's awesome. How many years has it been going?
So this will be our 10th year as Nebraska.Code, but then it was like I think we had 3 years of Nebraska.Code camp before that, so like 13 total. Missed a year for COVID, but yeah, 13 individual years.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common issue with a lot of these community groups. COVID kind of threw a wrench in, especially if your whole goal is to get a bunch of people together in a small room. That didn't play well with COVID and regulations and all that. So
yeah, organizing conferences was not a great industry to be in March of 2020. That's for sure.
Awesome. Cool. So Arthur, do you want to give a little bit of your background and kind of where your paths with Ken kind of overlapped? I know you and I first met actually in Kansas City, which is funny because we're both live in Omaha. So it was weird to meet you kind of outside of the normal beaten path, but Yeah, if you want to give that kind of background, how you got into tech and then where your paths crossed and how you got involved in Nebraska.Code.
So I got into tech like a lot of folks, just the 4-year degree kind of. I did computer engineering and then realized that was a dumb idea. I started doing Java, which seemed like a dumber idea, but the yeah, started working through that. That was 2004 was when I got my first job in Indianapolis, which is where I was living at the time in Indiana. Moved out here for a job in 2005 and been here ever since in Omaha. And around about 2014 is actually the first time I went to a tech conference, which was KCDC in Kansas City. And I was kind of blown away by it. Like Ken said, really the power and the energy you get when you get a bunch of people in a room talking or, in a series of rooms talking. And it's not just about the I'm sure we'll get into this later, but it's not just about the talks. It's about the talking to each other and the connections you make and the energy you build in the process. And I was like, that's cool. How do I get me some of that? And on 2015, I started giving lightning talks at work, actually, which we do lightning talks. We did every Friday, which if you're not familiar, lightning talks, just 10, 15-minute talks. And I started talking about data science stuff because that's what I was interested in at the time. Rapidly ran out of topics because I was challenging myself to basically sign up every week. I rapidly ran out of topics that I wanted to talk about in data science and then said, oh, I'm learning about these cognitive biases things. Let's talk about that. And then I discovered that talking about brains was way more fun than talking about data science. So kind of fell into that. But the first conference I spoke at was actually Nebraska.Code 2016, which would have been, first or second year that you ran it as actually Nebraska.Code, right?
I think so. Yep, second year.
Yeah. So that was kind of the off to the races on that piece. And then since then I've been, it's right in my backyard. So submitting to it's a gimme, but I wanted to jump in and start helping Ken to help us, grow it a little. Like conferences, especially in the U.S. post the pandemic, have not done well. There's been especially the last year and change, there's been a pullback in sponsorship. There's been a pullback in attendees, and I wanted to see if I could jump in and help because there's just so much value in something like that for the community.
Yeah, I think specifically that conference, both of them, I believe, have spun down. Clark has been pretty speaking out about that. It's just kind of hard to make the numbers work sometimes and getting people to travel. I think a lot of budgets have been kind of constrained, whether it's training or just, free time to go do stuff. But I'm kind of curious, what is your guys' sales pitch? Why should people attend conferences? Because I was kind of in the same boat as both of you. I heard people going to conferences. I was in Iowa when I first got out of school and was they were going to the No Fluff Just Stuff, which was the Java conference up there, or DevOps Days Des Moines, or Prairie Code was another one that people like to go to. And it was just yeah, this thing's so great. And I'm not going to lie, the first few years I was it's a bunch of dudes in a room talking about tech. What I can do that on YouTube. Why do I want to go? And then I actually got an opportunity to speak at, I think KCDC was my first big conference, and it was just kind of like you guys both said. After that, I want to be involved in this. This is so much more than just sitting in a room. I pictured it more of a college lecture for a class you didn't really want to be in. And that's totally not the case at all, because it's hey, the person speaking's actually excited and genuinely happy to be talking about this, not that it's their job. And everybody in the crowd is also excited to be there. So what's your guys' sales pitch to people? How do you try to convince people that this is something worth going to, worth interacting with?
You want to go first, Ken?
Yeah, I can go first. So, and not to get derailed too quickly, but I thought it was kind of interesting when you said that you met Arthur in Kansas City, even though you lived in Omaha. I think the first time I really met Arthur, even though he spoke at Nebraska.Code, and the first time I sort of met him and talked to him and got to know him was actually at Prairie Code in Iowa. So, and then found out, oh, you're from Omaha. That's weird. We had to come all the way to Des Moines to actually meet each other. That's wild. But I mean, just meeting people that's a big part of it for me. I've met so many great people, and especially when you're as a speaker. I mean, this is maybe more pitched to submit to conferences and speak at conferences, but you get to meet some of the most brilliant people in the tech industry, and and you don't just get to meet them, shake their hand, take a selfie, and leave. You're sitting down with them for hours, having long conversations. And even sometimes, if you're me and you just listen to other people having conversations, in speaker rooms and things like that, you learn a lot. You just kind of, the quality of the people that you surround yourself with has a big influence on who you are as a person. So I think just the networking is huge. The meeting people in real life is huge. Something I always like to do, when I go to a conference, when I'm not organizing and I can actually just go and enjoy it, is I will look at the agenda and I will find something on there that I don't even know what it means. Like I've never heard this term before. I have no idea, and I'll just go. And those have been some of the most interesting sessions that I went to. Like Hadoop. I'm sure you guys know what Hadoop is. I had no idea. I was like, what the heck is a Hadoop? And I went and sat down. It's like, oh, like it's like this huge data warehouse, data lake tool that I then was able to take back to the job that I was at that time and go, hey, there's this thing that we need to look at. So, I mean, it's really like you talked about. YouTube is a great way to get content, and I think it definitely is if you know exactly what you're looking for, right? You're like, oh, I want to learn unit testing in Angular. I can go to YouTube, find a unit testing in Angular or video, but sometimes you can just surprise yourself on what there is out there.
Yeah. So I've got a couple different answers. I'm sure it shocks none of you here. You've all met me that I've thought a lot about this. Value to an individual, there's value to a company, and then there's value to like the surrounding software community. For an individual, Ken's right on the money. One of the main things is people think about conferences like you said, it's like a college lecture, except it's not. Conferences aren't for learning, they're for learning about, is really the way I frame it. And what that means is that you should be going to those things that you don't know anything about. Some of that's just the structure of, you have an hour and the speaker has a vanishingly small slice of your attention that they can actually get across anything to you. And just the way that human memory works and the way that, transition from short-term to long-term memory actually works, there's a limited amount that they're going to be able to get across. And really the main things that any speaker should be trying to get across is largely, here's why you should care about this. This is why this matters. This is why you should take and you're not going to learn Hadoop in that session. You're going to learn, oh, I really should be paying more attention to this, and take that back and then go learn it, right? Then go find the YouTube thing about it, the egghead tutorial, the whatever, the book if you're old school and old fashioned. Those are the things that they're funnels, right? That you're going, oh, this is cool. And you're really spending only an hour of your time on it, where as opposed to, a whole course or a whole section of chunk where you're like, oh, do I care about this? The other is access to experts, right? And I think all of us will agree, since we've all spoken at conferences, that we're not experts, like capital E experts, right? But we've definitely thought a lot more about this than most of the folks who are giving a talk or haven't given a talk about it. So a lot of the time, the value is in getting to walk up to that person after the talk and going, wow, that was great. Thank you. I mean, assuming it was good, but then asking the question like, so I've got this weird situation. What do you think? And picking the speaker's brain for, you've got that moment, that time to spend with them on that stuff. But then beyond that, there's the value to the company is that funnel, right? The understanding of here's the things that are out there that I actually could go learn. What is there out there and what should I be spending time on? What should I be buying courses for my engineers? And above and beyond that, there's simply just the energy, right? What Ken was talking about was sitting and listening to these folks talk. You can find that almost at any table at lunch at a conference. There's an energy that's going on where these people are excited to be there and they're learning new things and they're seeing solutions to the problems or pathways to solutions to their problems. And that energy they take back with them. They bring it back with them to their jobs and go, oh, yeah, I'm going to try this. I learned this thing. Let's see if I can make this better. And that improvement drive that comes out of this is a major reason why we should be sending people to conferences, because you can't get that through watching even a good college course. It just doesn't work that way. And then lastly, the community piece of it is the value in a community is really those moments of stitching together, those communication points where you sit down and have a conversation with somebody in what they call the hallway track, where you meet somebody and get introduced to somebody and make friends, and those build on connections where you go, hey, I know a person who knows about that. Let me ask them about these things. And that, I mean, above and beyond that, there's also just the sheer value of speaking at a conference, which I think all of us will agree is really valuable. It's not just about the getting to stand up and pretend you're an expert. You do have to learn something a lot more to give a talk on it. And I could ramble at length about why that is psychologically, but it kind of forces you to understand it enough that you could explain it to somebody else. And that value actually makes you a better engineer.
See it, do it, teach it, right? Yeah, I want to add to what you said about the company. I think with, we would be remiss if we don't mention AI, so I'm going to bring it in. With all the changes AI is bringing to our world right now, I think maybe I'm wrong about this, but one of the shifts I think we're going to see is going to be a retention factor, where companies are going to want to retain their employees a little better, because I feel like the shift is going away from hiring right now to just making sure we have the tools we need. And to kind of elaborate on that, like if you own a company and you're considering buying a subscription to something like Pluralsight or LinkedIn Learning, like those are very useful tools for your engineers, but if we want to be honest about it, most of us who have those subscriptions pick and choose and don't complete, right? We'll watch one video here, one video there, start a course, and we really are getting some things out of it. And maybe unless your company does like an organized book club around that, where I've been a part of those, and those are good, where everybody is required to kind of watch the videos and we come back together and do things. But I want to just like go back to the sales pitch for the company side of things on sending your people to conferences, because it's going to give you more value in those 3 days than you're going to get out of your subscription in Pluralsight or LinkedIn Learning, just from the things Art mentioned with connections, the hallway track, the speaker connections that you can find out. Like, you do have weird problems at your work. LinkedIn Learning, Pluralsight, those courses aren't designed to help you fix the weird problems. They're designed to get you intro level. They're really good for learning things. And yeah, go to the conference, do what Ken said, go to something new. If you like it, sure, use your subscription to go watch some videos on it. Perfect. But the real value comes from that. You've got your engineers placed in a spot where they're going to get face-to-face time with other engineers who can help them solve that, or can connect them, like Art said, to other people who can solve that. Now you've got that first benefit, but I think the second benefit that's often overlooked is that it's an experience for engineers, especially if you go as a team. You send 3 or 4 people overnight to Kansas City or to LinkedIn or to Lincoln or wherever you're going, right? You're going to get a bonding experience that they're going to talk about for the whole next year. It's more valuable than, a weeks-long vacation in some places, just because of the fact that it's not taking away from their quote-unquote PTO time, but it's professional development, and it builds a bond for your team, which will help retain your members, but also helps you solve those harder problems by putting you in a position to have your people positioned next to people who can help them either, again, solve the problem or give them some ideas to try, or connect them to someone else who can.
And I thought of one more thing that you can get at a conference. If they happen to have like a piano in the lobby of the hotel room, sometimes in the evening, you might catch Brian belting out Billy Joel and just absolutely wowing the staff of the hotel. And you're not going to get that any other place.
I've got Desperado and a couple Billy Joel songs and a couple things ready to go for a couple weeks from now. Hopefully they won't kick me off.
That Brian was talking about. It's that those moments of connecting with other human beings outside of a workplace context that really help build the bonds of trust and what the psychologists call cohesion in a team. So especially if you're sending a team, or sending multiple people from across teams that have never met each other, have never interacted with each other before. Well, maybe not never interacted, but they're usually in a hallway, like, hey, how's it going, right? Mm-hmm. Coffee machine kind of manner, but this gives them the chance to have a deeper interaction over, hey, what talks have you been seeing? Hey, were you in that one? That sounded really cool. I bet we could do this. Or even just the the after hours moments, right? Like KCDC's done, they do their party usually in the Power and Light District, and there's one of the bars in there in the Mechanical Bull, and there's been some strange moments with coworkers on the Mechanical Bull previously that get talked about regularly. So it's those the moments are unstructured, right? And I think a lot of times companies are actually afraid of some of that, which is unfortunate, but that's the stuff that really drives human interaction and connection.
I think career-wise, selfishly too, it gets you that you guys keep talking about that piece to go back to work with. Like you talked about Hadoop or whatever technology, you can go in. If it's a decent speaker, I'm not even going to say a great speaker, they should be able to at least give you the sales pitch at a high level of like, why would I care about this technology? Because like we as engineers sometimes aren't great at doing that, and maybe we'll have a website that has like 50, 500, whatever, like tons of features. And it might be hard to sift through that if you're just Googling on your own, but it might be like, hey, here's the one use case that I would always go to this tool for. And if your organization's never heard of that tool before because it's newer or maybe not within your wheelhouse, like that can sometimes be 10 times worth the price of admission, because maybe whatever your alternative was going to cost more, be less efficient, be harder to work with, all these things that like you just now know the right tool. And then if you do need an expert to come in and like help you get over any humps or anything, it's, hey, I know somebody who's probably not affiliated directly with them that could help us and tell us like any gotchas. Most of those speakers are usually pretty open to talk about that. So you can be like, not only can I now go to work and say, hey guys, I've solved our problem. Here's what the answer is. And here's how it would work in our rough like scenario of our weird problems. So you now are like the hero at your company, right? Because you just proposed a solution that cost them, not very much money to go in and be like, hey, I talked to somebody who volunteered their time and now we have a solution to this big business problem that's probably costing us time, money, and frustration.
Yeah,
And
or
I
at
think,
least another avenue to try, right?
right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, a conference that I had went to, it was probably like 2017. I was at a company called Hobbytown, and we worked with Microsoft Dynamics, which it's like an accounting software, Microsoft accounting software. And so I went to a conference on it, and I had been struggling with this SQL Server issue that would just pop up and go away, pop up and go away, pop up, and I like for 6 months, I would kind of fix it, and then be like, it's fixed, and then 3 months later we have more lockups or whatever. I went to one session where on SQL Server and Dynamics and on tuning it and things like that I just fixed my problem, and it was like it was worth this conference right here was worth whatever it costed just for me to go to that one session. It was totally worth it, and it was difficult because it was kind of a difficult problem because like you can Google like oh, my SQL Server is not performing well, you're not going to get very far. But then when you actually talk to the Dynamics team and you're saying I'm having these issues, and they ask you a couple questions like, okay, you need to do this setting and do this and do this and do this, and it was I could have just took the rest of the conference off. Well, I learned that one thing, and that was worth twice the cost of admission.
So you just hit something that I always say, and this is, I think, on the person more than anything, but if you can get one thing out of the conference that you take back, it's always worth the price of admission, right? So if you go to a 3-day conference, you're going to get one thing if you work hard at it. Like if you just don't skip all the sessions and things, right? You'll get your one thing. And that there is always going to pay off. Just what Ken was just saying, right? So that leaves you usually 2 other days to learn additional things, right? And if you don't get anything, so that's why you don't have to feel like, oh, I don't know what Hadoop is, I probably shouldn't go to that session. Because I struggled with this when I was an employee. When someone would send me to a conference, I'm like, well, I really want to learn about React, but we're using Angular, so I probably shouldn't go to the React sessions. I think that's the wrong attitude, because even though the company's paying for it and taking me there, it's partly my job as an engineer to help them find out other things that are available. And if it is a total bomb session where the guy or the girl who's presenting just can't get the things out that I needed, maybe it's not necessarily that they did a bad job. Maybe it's just I didn't know the tech and I just didn't do it. Okay, wash your hands of that session and go to the next one and get something good from it, right? And yeah, you really have a hard time losing if you try. But I think one other thing I'd like to mention, I've done a lot of these workshops that the first day of conferences, they're usually 8 hours. So if you are like, well, we need to get some really good hands-on training, guess what? You can do that at these conferences too. Like, I know, Ken, you have a full day of conferences the day before, and then like, the other ones typically do as well. And yeah, it costs a couple $100 per person more to do that. But again, you're getting 8 hours of hands-on training, usually in a room with less than 20 people, unless it's a rare scenario where it's a really like hopping thing that has 30, 40, 50 people in it. But a lot of times it's pretty small and intimate in the case that you can actually get some real help, real hands-on, real conversations happening. And that workshop day is actually usually my favorite day of the whole conference, just because you can learn something, do some real hands-on stuff, get some new tech under your skin, whatever it is. So I would say, don't just think about the 1 hour sessions, but remember that there's other options too.
I did want to jump on the thing you were saying about, we feel like pressure to go to those Angular ones because your company works at Angular. Problem with those is often like you're spending 40 minutes of that session, of a 1 hour session, sitting there learning things you already knew. And maybe sometimes there is a 5-minute, oh, I didn't know that really does save you. But a lot of the time you're spending the whole thing like mostly irritated because it's like, yeah, that you're tuning out, you're just not paying attention. And that's normal. Like, I'm not faulting anyone for that, but that's why going to the stuff you don't know about is so much more valuable than unless you're doing something like a workshop. And in those cases, it's often what I tell folks is like, try to pitch it as, hey, I want to see somebody else's take on this, especially if it's a framework you're using. I want to see what idiomatic Rust looks like. I want to see what this Python thing, how somebody else is using it, because seeing somebody else use a tool in the context of something like a workshop can be really valuable. Mm-hmm. It's less so in like a 1 hour talk where you're going over, hey, here's, the reality of a lot of conferences and a lot of conference talks is that that's almost always going to be some degree of intro-level content, unless you're going to a very specific conference. But even then, the baseline for what can be assumed is pretty low most of the time, and it's just because a lot of the people there won't have all of the, there's a wide swath of engineers and so many tools and so many things out there. So you're going to have somebody wander into your talk that has no idea about this baseline you're talking about. So suddenly you have to do 5 minutes of, oh, I need to explain this thing so I can get to this, so I can get to this. And so it all makes sense and you understand why you would want to do this in the first place, which is all I'm really trying to get across. So the value really is in like, let's go to those weird sessions. Let's go to I've never heard of this. Let's go to that thing. Go to the UX ones. Go to the testing ones. Go to the weird, soft skills ones, which is a subtle plug. But hey, go to the things that you're like, I never heard of that. What is it? Guess what? That's the perfect place to find out.
Yeah, and then you've got the list of the speakers that they are. If you have that one weird Angular question that you were supposed to learn while you're there, go talk to them at the conference meetup. And say, hey, could you just give me like a high level of what your talk was about? And if you know anything about this problem I'm having, guarantee you, unless they're in a real bad place, they're going to talk to you and help you.
I think it's also interesting too, because it's almost like we've all worked with that crotchety coworker who knows a lot, but like you don't want to be like berated. Like if you ask a dumb question, I feel like it's a conference set of speakers is almost like that coworker's level of knowledge, but people who actually like want to talk to you and talk about the things that they're there for. So it's like the best of both worlds because it's somebody who knows a lot about this thing that you probably need help with. And the whole reason they're there is they want to talk to you and network with you. So from like an attendee standpoint, it's great because you can go and talk to people and figure out, what your problem is. I think also from a speaker standpoint, it's fun to see like, do I actually know this thing as well as I think I do? Or somebody could ask you a question that could completely turn how you've been looking at a problem completely upside down. And you're just like, oh, I've never even thought of it that way. But like this all gets real interesting when you just, I turned right at go and everybody else and follows me, but you're turning left. Like, how does that now work? Extrapolated out of, well, if I turned left here, does this make my problems easier or harder? And you might even find stuff that you didn't even know existed or figuring things out of like, well, now I, as the speaker, had this problem at work and somebody just completely changed how I looked at things and I've now solved this problem I had. There's this cool like symbiotic relationship of you're putting out information, but people could also ask you a question or just say something really, that just gets you thinking in just the right way that, kicks off that thought process. And now you're better off for it too. So I think both sides of that are super cool and rewarding that you can get both those sides of whether you're a attendee or whether you're a speaker. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think you're right in that none of us really got into this because we hate talking to people. I mean, some of us are definitely like introverts, which is a fun thing to be that, there's more of us than you'd think, like introverted speakers. But we didn't get into this because we hate the doing of it and we hate talking to people about it. So definitely if you're an attendee listening to this and don't feel nervous about asking questions. Like that's literally what we're there for. Because especially once you get to a certain level of speaking, they'll record your talks and they'll put it up on YouTube anyway, which is I've had that as an argument people have said about why should I go to the conference when I can get all of this stuff after the fact. And I just want to grab them by the lapels and shake them and be like, because you get to talk to people about it. Like
and you can help drive the presentation, right? Like if you say something slightly controversial or something, like it'd be like, okay, I'm just going to go along with it. But like, I think there is a certain level of pushback you're able to give when somebody says like, here's how you have to do UI UX, or here's how you have to do Angular. Be like, okay, well, what if my company doesn't support that paradigm? Is this still even possible? Or like you can help drive and give feedback to the speaker and help influence the talk or help you. Whereas like online, you can throw it in a comment section. Somebody might roast you for asking a dumb question, or maybe the speaker doesn't ever even respond because they don't realize the organizers put it out there. Like there is that level of disconnect too of who's going to answer. Is the speaker going to be, or is it going to be somebody in the community? Is it going to be the organizer? Does the organizer even know the answer? Because, some of them are just finding speakers, but they don't necessarily know the topics that deep. Yeah, there's a ton of value there that I think can't be overstated.
I definitely do some conference speaking, but not nearly as much as you guys have done. So I'm wondering if you guys have any horror stories as speakers that you'd like to share.
Boy, where do you want to start? Like with horror stories with tech, horror stories with people? I'll tell you two really quick things that are troublesome. One of them is just tech related. Like when you do a workshop, a lot of times you don't remember that the users that are taking a workshop will only have a little laptop screen. And so you've got like these instructions and the stuff that they're supposed to do side by side. So the tech there is a little bit tricky. So the horror story can be, they can't get signed into Azure. They can't do the thing they're supposed to do. And now they're on this little screen and they're just like throwing their hands up in the air. And you're just like, I'm sorry. We only have 8 hours. I have to move on. I kind of want to say this, and I don't know if I should, but I'm going to anyway. So we were just talking about questions, and a lot of the talks that we give, questions are generally good and actually useful. Like you're saying, like when you ask me a really tough question, not only can I think about what that might entail for you and help you respond to it, and the rest of the audience gains from that experience, but I can also tailor my talk next time to kind of preemptively strike on that exact problem. And like now my talk is better because I know about it. So that's not a horror story, but the horror story is the other side of the equation, when the person's in the room and they won't stop asking questions. And the questions they're asking are clearly just to show that they have knowledge of the subject that you don't have, or that they think you should have, or that they want to position themselves as another expert in this, and they just kind of try to hijack your talk a little bit.
Front row guys.
So, yeah.
What I call them.
What do you call it?
Front row guys.
Front row guys.
They'll sit in the front row. It's 99.9% of the time a guy determined to show that they know more than you / should be giving this talk, which my usual response to that is, I mean, they don't show up at my talks because of the kind of thing I talk about, but when I talk to other people about them, the response is basically like, well, you should be giving this talk. Why didn't you submit it? That's why, because they want the audience without the work.
Or they just missed the deadline.
Didn't know it was even open for call for a presentation.
Yeah. I think
So
I don't know, horror stories. Good.
I was gonna say I have a couple of horror stories, and I guess my first one was the very first talk I did. It was at Iowa Code Camp. It was on using Silverlight and SharePoint together, and one person showed up. So that was it turns out Silverlight's kind of a niche topic, and SharePoint's kind of a niche topic, and everybody the person who showed up kind of did my thing, which is like, I don't know what any of these things are. I'm going to go and just hear what it is. So then I just gave my presentation to just one dude who was like, it turned out okay, but it's got a little embarrassing when you only have one person in your talk.
Can I
my
jump in
second
on that
one
a
was
sec?
yes.
I want to
yes,
jump. I
definitely.
want to put a pin in there for a sec, because like the people that show up generally are the ones that need to be there. Like, even if they're showing up because they're auditing and they're just like, I had no idea what Silverlight is. Tell me about Silverlight. At least they're curious. At least they're interested. It does suck when you get 1 to 5 people in a room, whatever, but they're generally there because they're interested in the thing. And even if, like, there's always times you're going to scrub out. I think Scott Hanselman, if people know who he is, posted a thing at one point, and it was a photo of an empty room. And like, if Scott Hanselman can get empty rooms, any one of us can, for sure. So it's going to happen at some point. I wanted to put a pin in that before you jumped on. So.
Yeah. Well, so my second one is a little similar, but this was actually more recent. I got invited, so my session that got accepted was C# past, present, and future. So it's a talk I do where I just start at version 1 of C#, and then I go all the way up to today, and I go really, really fast. And here's all the features. Here's why they're important. Here's how you should write software according to. But the conference I got accepted to was an Apache conference, and I was like, that's weird. So, and my talk was on the last day, and I spent the first couple of days there. I would talk to people and, just at lunch or whatever. And they're like, oh, what are you speaking on? I said, C#. And they're like, what is that? We don't know what that is. Or they would say, do people still use C#? I don't think that's used anymore. Like, no, definitely. There's definitely people still using .NET and C#. Trust me. I know hundreds. So it's definitely a thing. And I was just like, I did not meet one person who knew what C# was or like used it at all. And I'm like, why did I get invited to speak at this conference? So in my session, I had four guys there, but they were from the Groovy team. Right. And so they invited me specifically because they want to know what was going on in C#, so they could use that information to add features to Groovy. And so I literally, they were the ones who were picking the sessions, and they're like, us four want to see it, so we're going to invite him in to do the stock. And it was a great, I mean, it turned out it was great, but it was kind of the weirdest conference experience I've ever had.
You were an inadvertent spy for Groovy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not so groovy.
Trying to think, I've got tons of horror stories, like travel related, various other nonsense. I think I'll just tell the one I tell the story all the time, but I love it. It was actually the first conference I was at, so Nebraska.Code 2016. One of the talks I was giving was on Git. It was probably one of the most technical talks I've given, and it went into like Git behind it. Like, I called it the Git 201 basically. So I got into these atomic particles of Git and build up a commit from the command line directly by creating blobs and then trees and all the rest of this, just to literally show how all of this stuff worked. But Rob Richardson, who's another speaker out of Arizona, was there. giving his Git talk. And if you've never seen Rob's Git talk, he starts out by just asking the audience, like, what problems do you have with Git? And then he opens Notepad and just starts writing down people's questions. And then at the end of it, he just kind of reorders them slightly and opens a terminal and then gives an entire talk with no slides, effortlessly weaving through all of these questions. And this is before my talk, and I was gonna go scope out Rob's talk because I'm gonna go see the competition, right? A little bit cocky, sitting in the audience, like, well, this was cool. I'm never gonna be doing this again. I'm gonna give my stupid little talk, and then I'm done speaking, like, forever. But so I gave my talk, and someone in the audience came up and said, I've been to 6 or 7 Git talks, and yours is the first one that made it make sense for me. And so I was like, okay, call that my like hook set moment. That was the moment where I'm like, oh, now I'm going to be doing this forever. So I went from like never doing this again to I will be doing this for the rest of my life, like in the span of a couple hours, basically. I mean, there's all kinds of horror stories, but I like that story because it's fun and it really does tell talk to the value point, right? Like you can find information on YouTube, you can find, Stack Overflow questions, you can find stuff, but like the value of a good speaker is that not even a good speaker. I don't even want to phrase it in like good, bad, like as a dichotomy, but like the value of a talk that connects with you is that it's someone with your experience giving information in a way that you can understand it and connecting with you specific and your lived experience of whatever it is. Like just because of the way their brain works or because of the way they've come at it, like, okay, I was a Java developer and now I do a whole bunch of different stuff and all these things. My past experience comes through in almost all of my talks in some way. And that means that somebody who has a similar experience can connect better with that and learn more from that than they could just from somebody who doesn't. And that is something you're really only going to get at a conference unless you are obsessively just going through these videos, right? Just Googling, hey, random talk on Angular is not going to get you that kind of connection, and especially not going to get you to the point where you can connect with that speaker after the fact, which I know we keep hammering on about, but it's really important.
I want to add to that because I think the first time I ever met or saw Art was 26 Prairie Code, and it was his Git talk. And if you remember your talk at all, I'm sure you do a little bit, you used a tool called GitViz, which was a .NET framework tool that you could use to visualize the repo. And just what Art said, from that talk, he was able to show me what it actually meant to move commits around and what it looked like in the underlying structure. And me being a visual person, I was like, yeah, this is it. This makes sense. And I don't think, any chance I can, I try to go to Art's talks. I'm going to plug him because like, I know he's switched to all the psychological stuff and all the things since then more, but man, I've never been disappointed. So, Yep.
Well, now I'm embarrassed.
That was my number one goal. No, I don't remember when we met the first time, Ken. I was trying to think of that. I just don't know, like, if it was just because I came to Nebraska.Code or if I saw you at Prairie Code, probably, maybe. So
yeah,
anyway.
It seems like you've always been there. So I don't know. It probably was Prairie Code. Yeah, it probably was Prairie Code, though. I imagine that's probably how you found out about Nebraska.Code. I would imagine also.
Yeah.
So since we're all talking about Art, do you know that it was going to turn into this, Art, that we all say nice things about you?
I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah, so Art's obviously he comes and speaks at Nebraska.Code a lot, but he's, I think, one of the only speakers where I have people come up to me and tell me, just attendees, like, oh yeah, I always go to every one of Art's sessions every time. I don't even care what the title is. I always go. He's just so great. So I've had multiple attendees tell me that, and you usually don't. You hear that necessarily about an individual speaker, like somebody who's, but it's, I have had multiple people tell me that about Art. So I always really appreciate whenever he comes to speak, because I know there's going to be a couple people that are excited for sure. I'm sure more than a couple, but definitely a couple.
Put him in the big room, Ken. Put him in the big room. We need some room to sit.
I think my light bulb moment, Art's really good at this too. One of my favorite talks I've ever seen is Nicholas Means, the original Skunkworks at Lead Dev. He was like, what does this have to do with software development? Like, he does a really good job of like, there's a little bit of history there and we build on it. And I feel like Art, you're really good at that as well, where you'll have something that like, what am I going to get out of this? Like, am I going to get like feel better or move? Like, what is really going to happen? And then like you trickle ways to get it back home that it's like, oh, I feel like I have something to take away from this now, where it's like, it's one of those ones you guys talked about, right? Like, go sit into the UI UX one, go sit into the other one. You're just like, how is this going to be relevant to my job or my life or anything? And then like it finds its way back home and hits home, and you're like, oh, that was good. I really enjoyed that part. Or, when it finally clicks with you. I think good speakers or people who are like really working on resonating their craft and working on that are really good at that. I think I would say, with a caveat, always give speakers feedback too, because they're working on it. Some of their talks are the first time they've ever given it. And when you go and try to compare maybe one talk of a seasoned international speaker like Art versus somebody like me who may be giving something for the first time, those probably hit different because there's just a different level of experience, different level of, how polished the talk is, how much feedback it's been, like a diamond, what one has been maybe pressed and stress tested more than others. But I would give a plug to, I know a lot of conferences will ask for feedback. Be constructive, but always be giving feedback because they want to make sure the next time somebody gives that same talk that it hits home for you or for the next person. So that maybe, like we talked about earlier, you don't have to give the little nudge of like, how does this work for me? They can just like incorporate it.
Like the conference feedback really helps the conference also as well. Figure out, like, if you go to a speaker and let's just say they're not great, right? Definitely give feedback on that. It helps the speaker get better. It also helps the conference understand, hey, this is like the third time we've taken a shot on this person. Maybe they're not cut out for this. Like, that's the reality, unfortunately, of some of it. And they won't know that unless you actually give that feedback. If you want to give feedback to the speaker and you have something constructive or interesting to say, like that, definitely, I would almost do that in person more than through a feedback form. Obviously, if you don't want to have that conversation, go ahead and do it in the feedback form. But the best feedback I get on talks is almost always in person from somebody who comes up and says, hey, what about this? Or I was thinking about that. Or somebody that brings their own perspective and says, well, you said this, and I don't know that I agree with that in these cases. And it's like, oh, okay. And everybody's giving a talk from their own perspective, right? Like I said. And so if you can help them see a wider perspective as well, that means they can help make the talk more applicable to everybody that's going to wander into it.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I always like to get the feedback on the form though. That way I can copy and paste that into like my sessionized talks. And yeah, hey, this is the stuff that people said about it. That's all.
Oh yeah, like if you're gonna give really good feedback, definitely drop it in the thing because I have a little text file that I copy paste that into. So when I feel really bad about like life / everything, I'm open that up. Like you get that point where you're like so far into a talk and you're just like, why am I doing this to myself again? And like you have something that you can open up and be like, oh, that's why. It really helps to get you over the hump.
I think it helps definitely when it's like, why am I applying for another conference? Like that's when you need the little push.
Art knows all the psychological tricks.
Awesome. Well, I think we're getting close to about time. Is there we'll start with you, Ken, any other shout outs you want to give? Nebraska.Code we'll have in the description. If you've listened to this podcast, you'll see the little promo we'll do in the start. But any other call outs or plugs you want to do? How do we keep up with what you're doing, where you're at, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I'm not great on social media personally, but I think Nebraska.Code exists on all the socials. We kind of moved away from X a little bit for Blue Sky and some of the other socials a little bit more now. Other than that, definitely check out Nebraska.Code. We got 80 sessions this year. Plus 8 workshops. We got 3 great keynotes, and it's really going to be a great year. So I just hope if anybody's listening to this and you're in the area, you check it out, and then tell me you heard me on this podcast, so I can feel good about that too.
Arthur, any plugs you want to give?
So you can find me on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn. I'm pretty much the only Arthur Doler on the internet, so if you find one, it's probably me. I want to echo Ken, like if you're on the fence about coming to Nebraska.Code, I would definitely take a shot at it if you're, within the region. Otherwise, I would go find your local conference. There's almost certainly one of them, something regional, something you can get to. Go find it, go, whatever it takes to get that, your ticket, whether you can convince your boss or not, just go do it. There's real value in it, and finding and building those senses of community. We're getting to the point where you can be inspired like Ken was to go, hey, let's take this back. Let's bring this back and do something locally with it. Because those are the things that really stitch together a community of devs, whether that's a global virtual one or whether that's a local physical one. I also do want to plug, I'm pretty sure they're running a Bar Camp Omaha again this year, sometime later in the fall. I don't know exactly when yet because I've been tuned out of that piece of it. But that's another local conference. It's an unconference, which is there's no schedule to it. You show up, sign up for give a talk that day. It runs on a Saturday usually. and they do like the talks can really be about anything. They have tracks, like 4 different tracks, but it doesn't matter. Give a talk about something you're passionate about, something you're interested about. It's a great way to kind of get over the hurdle of getting into conference speaking because it's such a low bar. Because there are folks who've come with prepared things, and then there are folks who come and they decide to give a talk at lunch, and they're jamming on some slides literally as they're eating over lunch. So like there's just a wide variety on, you know, types of talks and types of speakers and experience levels of the speakers. So it's a real easy jump to get into speaking if you're interested and inspired to do so. Otherwise, it's fun to just watch people talk about things they're passionate about.
Awesome. Plug for AI too. If you're trying to get your stuff into slides, it's really good at taking information in your head and putting it on a PDF or a PowerPoint. So give that. Brian, you got any last minute plugs you want to?
No, but I'll say if you want to have some impromptu jam sessions, come to Nebraska.Code. We'll probably throw together a little musical fiesta in the auditorium, not the auditorium, the lobby of the Cornhusker. Also, it's really fun to just kind of, I like Lincoln a lot. College towns are the best. So
Awesome.
there's plenty
Thanks,
to do.
everybody. Cool. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you all hopefully at Nebraska.Code.
Yep, bye, everybody.
everybody.
Thanks, Alec. Thanks, Brian.